Okay, we are now live.
This is Literary Roadhouse, one short story once a week. I'm Gerald.
I'm Maya.
And I'm Anais.
Whoa, did we forget something? Did I
Yes,
forget something?
you did.
Was it me?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was me. Okay, let's do this
Potty
one more
mouth
time.
section.
Sorry. Hey, at least I can have duplicate windows open now. That's an improvement over before. I'm like, okay, who's got the next one? Okay, let's do this over. 3, 2, 1, action!
This is Literary Roadhouse. One cock up, one suey. No.
Now that needs to go in the podcast.
Can you put it at the end? Like, you know how
Totally, like a blooper.
Yeah.
That was awesome. We're having too much fun today, Gerald.
I know. That's not allowed. Gotta be serious. Serious face.
Serious face. Okay, you can do this. You got it.
I'll count me in. 3, 2. I can't do that. Oh, the bloody hell. 3, 2, 1. This is Literary Roadhouse. One short story once a week. I'm Gerald.
I'm Maya.
And I'm Anais.
I cannot wait to talk about this story. This story, Safe Somewhere by Baird Harper. I'm really looking forward to it. But before we get started, I do need to give the disclaimer. Usually, we're pretty good, but occasionally we do slip into potty mouth. If we do, I'll let you know in the show notes so you can be able to see that both in the iTunes rating and if you're using a podcatcher. If you click the little I button and it shows you the notes, it'll say whether it's explicit or clean. I'm not foreseeing anything with this particular story, but who knows? We get creative.
If you haven't read Safe Somewhere yet and don't want to be spoiled, pause the podcast, read the story, and then come back. So the story this week is Safe Somewhere by Baird Harper. We are introduced to the main character, who we learn later is called Alan Bell, and his best friend Cy. They both work in the mustard works factory. Cy loses a bet amongst him and their friends and leaves work at lunchtime to verify an old story concerning a brothel in town. The factory has been built underground for safety, but we learn it is old, dangerous, and safety measures for the workers are scant. Rumours abound between the old-timers at the plant. And, late in the afternoon, there is a fire in the lower level of the plant. Everyone evacuates and they assume that Cy didn't make it back from lunch, but then they see his truck in the car park and later learn that he was sent down to the lower level to clean as punishment for being late back from lunch. But all the time, the rumours are that he wasn't there at all, but had disappeared to another plant, another country, or is working for the government. No evidence of him is ever found at the factory, and the rumours continue to build and build.
Okay, this is going to be fun. Let's start with top level. How did everybody feel about this story?
I can go first. So, top level, I guess just as a reader, it didn't really grab me. It was easy to read, but then I got at the end and I sort of shrugged, and it isn't the kind of story I would recommend to many people, which is harsh. But then looking at it slightly more analytically, there's a lot of interesting things, some which I like really well, some which I don't, so I want to get into those.
How about you, Gerald?
Yeah, I liked it. I liked it. There's no magical realism, so that's a thumbs up from me. I felt a bit like Anais first read through. I thought, yeah, it's a good story. It's well written, but then when you read it through again, you think, oh, I'd forgotten that bit, and the links to there's a lot more in depth to the writing, not much to the story, but certainly to the writing. So it made me appreciate the writing more.
I love this story from the first sentence. I absolutely loved this story. I'm so glad that you submitted it, Gerald. It's exactly the kind of story that I'm finding I gravitate to. It was very finely crafted, like you said, about the language and seeing things that were specifically done within the story. As far as the story itself, I loved the realism of it and the fact that it showed me a part of the U.S. that I don't think we see often. Like, we see like the hick town in a lot of films, we see the cities in a lot of films, but to see like this very specific small town that has some very smart people in it, but it's got one industry and it's very interdependent with that industry, and to see it from their side was just wonderful. I absolutely loved the story from the very beginning, and every time I read it afterwards, I loved it.
Oh.
So I guess this is the huge difference. We're going to have a real discussion here.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, for me, that was probably, in terms of story and content, the thing that I liked the most was specifically that you're getting this insight into a small town. But at the end of the day, still the plot of what actually happened kind of left me shrugging a little bit. But I agree with Gerald that now getting a little bit more meta, the command of the language was probably what impressed me the most. The way that this author, he knew
Yeah.
exactly what he was doing with
The
every
command
word,
of language was
every
really good,
sentence.
which I find interesting because this story, the writer wrote it several years ago. It was published last year, but this was an older story that he wrote, I guess, while he was either in his MFA program or freshly from his MFA program. And as I'm reading it, I can definitely see that the language is very finely crafted. As for the story itself, I actually enjoyed the story. Specifically, there were points in the story that I found were really interesting. The whole idea of not digging into mysterious things because you might not want to know the answers once you've dug into them was something that I thought was very beautiful. That's what Sai said pretty much when he was leaving for the brothel, and then later on we find out it's his sister that's in the brothel, and to imagine what he must have felt and seeing her reaction, not only because her brother saw her like that, but also then he turns around and dies. That was something that was beautiful. I also liked, they start in a small town that's so dependent on the industry that when the inspectors show up, the workers give the inspectors a hard time and they lie and they're in cahoots with the company to cover up abuses. And then it goes full circle at the end of the story where they've got a brand new plant that has all these newfangled, safety procedures and people are getting more breaks, but it's not like they're still interdependent. That relationship I still got the sense that was there. And so I like the actual plot of the story, I thought brought up a lot of interesting thoughts for me. And I won't say that this is not a plot heavy wham bam, all kinds of craziness happening, but you've got, like, on its basic level, you've got an explosion, you've got searching for a missing girl. Like, there's a lot of plot elements in this story compared to a lot of the short stories we've been reading. I think it's probably got more quote unquote technical plot. It's a little more Michael Bay than most of the stuff we've been reading.
Well, that's just it. So when you said it's not a wham bam plot, but it could be, because what's actually happening is so wham bam. You have this massive explosion, there's mustard gas everywhere, cows, birds, cats are dying left and right, but the voice seems so kind of removed from what's actually happening. I think that was actually my biggest barrier to enjoying it, was there was something about the voice that never translated for me the sense of urgency that you would expect with such a calamity.
And to me, that voice was much more realistic. It's kind of like the in shock, seeing stuff kind of voice, rather than like what you would expect in like a blockbuster film with this kind of thing. There's always the guy that's taking charge and running into the flaming buildings and stuff. I felt like the story showed perhaps a more realistic experience of what that would be like to watch your life and your town fall apart around your ears. And that's what I enjoyed about it. I think it's funny, the very thing that I liked about it is the very thing that you didn't like about it, and that's what makes this discussion so much fun right now.
And I think, I hesitate to say it, but I think you're both wrong.
Woohoo!
Gerald out of left field.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's why we like him.
Because yeah, I permanently live in the left field. Because I think in the early part of the story, there's a whole time and time again you're told this is a dangerous place. You know, there's mustard gas. It's built underground for safety. And yet the safety precautions are almost non-existent. And so what happens? They're so used to dealing with this stuff. They're so used to working in this horrible environment, and there's stories about other fires, and there's story about cancer, and all this sort of stuff that actually the guy, the main character himself, it just sort of treats it as it's sort of every day. I think it's there's a phrase for it, I can't remember what it is, but it's, you know, he's so used to working in this environment that yeah, the thing blows up and there's a fire,
And you're like, okay, what's
it's
next?
and people are dying, but it's sort of what they sort of expect, and I think they knew it was going to happen sometime, so it's happened, and you know, let's just get away. That's what I took from it anyway.
One of the things I loved about what you just said is that it reminded me. I love how nonchalant the narrator just, the cancer of the old dudes. Oh yeah, the old dudes have cancer. It's just so freaking matter of fact. And there's such a complete disconnect between safety and the inspectors and the recognition that the inspectors are there to protect them versus, yeah, we're all going to get cancer and that's fine because, you know, this plant is what keeps this whole town standing. It was a mindset that I don't think I've ever seen in literature, even in movies, really. Usually there's some acknowledgement that the company is bad or the company is the savior. Like, there's never, like, acknowledgement of this huge, ambiguous gray area. And I think it's really common. You see that, you know, after the oil spill, there were a lot of people that worked on the oil rigs that were like, when's the oil rigs coming back? We need it back right away. And people are like, why would you want that back? Like, it just ruined your entire state. Their safety standards aren't there. There's no way to make sure it's safe. And they're like, no, I need my job. Like, come on now. Get it back up and running. And that's a mindset that I don't think anyone's really delved into to really explain it to somebody who's not like that. You know, I'm a West Coast liberal type. Like, that mindset is completely over my head. And the story helped me understand it a little bit and to have more sympathy for that.
Yeah. And one thing I thought was interesting was when they started thinking, oh, maybe Cy escaped. They started coming up with the fantasy that Cy's not dead. He left for Mexico and Canada. They were like, there was this moment where the narrator says, oh, maybe we can all escape too to Lincolnville, which is where the other mustard plant is. Like, that's where they're gonna go. That's their escape story. But I think you're right. I think there is a sort of casualness about the fact that everyone is going to die in the long term about this plant, right? There's just sort of a casual acceptance, whether it's cancer or an accident or it wears you out or it breaks your back. But I think there still has to be a difference between seeing your death and knowing how it's going to be 50 years from now versus having this thing explode right now and having the area turn a bit into a war zone, which isn't that I expect them to run around like headless chickens, but like for example, when they're in the bar, and because this is so finely crafted, I know this isn't an oversight. The author did this on purpose. They're in the bar, and the TV cuts to commercials. What calamity happens that the news don't just stop, you know, just have the footage going 24/7 for at least 2 or 3 days? Like, just little things like that.
In the 90s, it didn't. In the 90s, they would have cut for commercial. I remember O.J. Simpson and the cuts for commercial. And you'd go back to the other channel. You're going channel 2, channel 4, channel 2, channel 4. Going back and forth. I like what you said, Anais. I personally felt that when he was driving into it looking for Min, I felt like that was his version of, oh my God. You know, I do this, a lot of men do this when there's disaster, they get tunnel vision and they focus on something that they have to do or they have to save, and that amount of focus keeps you from freaking out. And I felt like that's what he was doing in trying to find Min. It really wasn't about Min. It really wasn't about Sai. It was giving him something to do so that he just went into autopilot. This needs done, this needs done, this needs done. And I felt like he was that kind of guy. And that's what I loved about him searching for Min. I felt like his search for Min made him more humane, made him more of a human being to me. Because up until then, I don't think we got a lot of character development of him. I felt like his search for Min told me more about him than it did about Min or the town. Whereas previous to that, I felt like the story was really showing me about the town and showing me about the dynamics of these men.
I thought, I mean, when you're sort of comparing it to other, and I think Maya, you said it's different to how everybody else treats this sort of situation. And I was just thinking about Silkwood, which is again a small town with a nuclear facility, and how that's treated when something goes wrong. It's all hell breaks loose, and alarms go off and people rush and they're scrubbing, and because in this the people are complicit in the covering up of the lack of safety, because they know this is all they've got. If this plant closes, then the town's dead, and it makes a reference to that in the story as well. So I liked the fact that they understood this. It's not sort of explicitly stated, but that the people understand this. So yeah, they don't want the inspectors to come and close them down, even though it'll make their lives safer and keep them well, because without this, the town's got nothing.
It's funny. When the plant first goes on fire and there's all the bells and everything, and the guys are thinking that it's just another drill. They're just ignoring it, and then they get tired of hearing it, so that's why they leave. Did anybody else kind of crack up a little bit inside?
Yeah, and don't forget that they thought these bells were going off because the inspectors were here, because before then it was like one bell means put on your gloves, two bells means put on a hazmat suit, or if there isn't a hazmat suit for you because you don't have enough, just go take a break. Which I thought that was funny. Like, that tells a lot about the culture of the plant.
And eventually they get tired of it, and so then everyone just doesn't do anything for the inspectors anymore.
Friday.
I made a note of, that's the first thing I made a note of. One blast meant gloves mandatory, two meant go to find a hazmat suit or take a break if there aren't any left. And then the following sentence, there was something for 3 alarms too, but it got confusing after a while, and eventually no one bothered to do anything. Which is...
Oh no, y'all froze.
No.
Oh, there you are again.
It's you.
It's me.
I was just going to go back to what Maya was saying, that she didn't think there was a lot of character development up until he went to save Min, which, by the way, I don't have a problem with him going to save Min and that tunnel vision, because I kind of have like my own story of my own tunnel vision and Calamity. But before I get to that, the character development, I think, was there through the voice of the character, which was something that niggled at me. Like, the way he describes himself, he's young, small town, not very well educated, yet he has this kind of wizened, kind of like professor voice and way of thinking about things. And it isn't that I don't believe that could exist. It's just, it's sort of, it kind of like undermined the culture a little bit. Like, there was this sort of, yeah, we're all here just kind of like a bunch of dudes. There's the young guys in the southeast plant or southwest plant, and the old guys are in the nicer plant with vending machines, and none of us got much of an education, but yet he's talking like he went to an
I actually made a note of that, because Sai is the one who's most educated. Sai is the one who, valedictorian, should have gone to college. But his friends aren't. And there were a couple places where I was like, is that a word he would use? Is that even a word he would know? Eventually I put it aside and I just told myself the narrator isn't the first person. Like, I just kind of just said it's like an omniscient narrator, and that's how I excused it. But if it's not an omniscient narrator, if the narrator is Alan, then there were several points where I think he was speaking above his pay grade.
Yeah, he was so wizened in a way where I was just like,
Now, wizened I get, because a lot of these old guys without a lot of
yeah, but he's
education are
young.
a lot wiser than freaking professors. But the language use, I didn't feel like there were parts where the language use wasn't something that the uneducated friend would use. It was
Yeah.
something that Cy would use. I felt like this story had more of Cy's voice. How
Yeah,
about
Right.
you, Gerald?
I don't think you can say that Alan was uneducated, because maybe through the language and through the narration we show that he is educated. He just hasn't been to college. He's not anywhere a patch on Psy. And Psy is the perfect grades. He's musician. He's sort of everything. So I took it that Alan was just a sort of fairly ordinary sort of guy. Yes, he's been
Hmm.
he's been educated, but there's nothing. He's stuck in this town. There's nowhere else for him to go.
Yeah, I think for me the thing was when he's describing Cy, he's comparing their friends to Cy. Like he's describing Cy in reference to the rest of the group. And so there was a sense that Cy was the smart one, Cy was the one that did all the reading, and they were just normal guys. And like I will say that most of the voice sounded fine, but there were a couple places where I was like, really? Maybe is he smarter? Has he is it maybe not Alan's voice? Like it did make me question, but it wasn't something that really bothered me. Like it didn't make me question more than just noting that Alan was speaking in a way that I wouldn't normally expect for what he stated his own character was. And I think, in a town like that, maybe you would like if you were a young normal guy who was really smart, maybe you would downplay, your own intellectual ability. If you had a friend who's like so far out of the left field, maybe that would be normal. I don't know. I really just don't know.
Mm. Yeah, I think
I mean, the truth is, it kept Anais from really enjoying the story. Like,
Yeah.
if it was enough of a departure for her that it kept her from fully embracing the voice.
Yeah, and in two ways. One is that I didn't believe him, and two, it's that it really robbed the urgency of every situation. Like when they break into Sai's house and they break into his sister Ming's room, and the guys, what's the line that they're licking their teeth and knocking down cow licks, and I'm like, I get this is a boys will be boys joke, but considering that her canary just died and there's cows dying and there's a yellow fog everywhere, it seemed almost like I get the joke, but you just rob the scene of any sense of urgency to make it. Like there was just kind of stuff like that where it's like I get that he's reflexive and he's wise and he's so cool, but it just
Oh, funny. I didn't see that as a joke. I
mean,
didn't. The whole
my
thing with
point.
the cow lick and the teeth, I saw that as presenting yourself respectfully for a female. I didn't
But
see that as something that was funny.
I mean, he explicitly talks about how there's like a line, I don't have it up right now, but there's a line where it was like that even in the face of like a disaster, they're still thinking about their childhood, the girl with the pink bra and the toothpaste commercial. There's still that like lustful aspect of it, which is just like really like
Yeah,
right
see,
now.
yeah, I didn't really see it as lustful. I saw it as just a measure of respect. She's somebody that left and came back. She's somebody that experienced the other world, that was on TV. She's like their movie star in town. And you wouldn't show up at that person's door looking like crap, and I saw that as them trying to present themselves before opening the door, just trying to be polite. And I think that's interesting that you saw it as the author, trying to release tension through joking, because that's not something I saw at all. I think that's really interesting.
Yeah, I mean the joke is in
I'll have to go back and reread that.
yeah, yeah, because it has that line about how the kind of girl that all these guys want, a simple girl, the kiss me you fool kind of girl. Like there is that like dating, courtship, lust aspect of it that made me kind of just,
Yeah, see, that wasn't as strong for me, and maybe that's why I enjoyed it more, because to me that sense wasn't a very strong portion of the story for me. How about you, Gerald? Did that stand out for you?
No, I think again, I think it's just sort of small town behaviour. Here's this sort of unattainable woman. She's semi-famous because she's been in one series of adverts, and so I think they would naturally hesitate before breaking into the room. I think they would, because she's this star, she's famous, and they'd all love to be dating her, and but they just realize it's not going to happen, so they just sort of think, it just felt natural to me that they would do this. And again, it sort of downplays the sort of excitement, hysteria, the panic over what's happening. It was just an instinctive reaction that they'd smart themselves up before they broke down the door.
Yeah, I'm looking at it. Oh, because I think that's really interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it's one of those things that if you were removed, if you were like 2 towns over, suddenly it seems like, yeah, because you're not the one who's worrying about whether or not you're going to have a job in a month, whether or not they're going to rebuild the plant. But it just seems like when you're in the thick of it, it seemed a little odd.
Here, I just want to read that part because I actually, it seems like we all read it differently. Mm-hmm. Well, I probably read it closer to Gerald. I think me and Gerald read it closer together. And it's funny because a lot of times we break along gender lines on stuff like this, but I feel like maybe it's a generational line on something like this time. Mm. And I wish, times like this, I wish Kenechi were here as my test subject. Yeah. He was my great, test subject to see, if we were off in left field or not. It says, no one answered our knock, so we let ourselves in with the key beneath the mat and rushed through the house calling for Sai, for sweet blonde Min. All our lives we'd been dreaming our way into the locked bedroom of that toothpaste starlet, the red-lipped sister with the big heart puffing her chest. But as we came up the stairs, our yearning became confused. Did we really want her to be there? How to explain about her brother and still enjoy the hugs she might collapsedly offer? We loved Min exactly this way, exactly the way that makes young men long for a simpler world, one that can explain intelligently to a world so rudimentary that a girl wouldn't require any explanation at all, just shut up and kiss me, you fool. With the rest of the house cleared, we gathered at her bedroom door, licking our teeth and knocking down cowlicks. 2 kicks and the bolt ripped through the jamb. Splinters settled across her pink duvet, bras hanging from the bedpost, but no Min. Yeah, to me, that portion, it was really talking about their relationship with Min to me. When I read that, I see them, Min isn't a real girl to them. She's a symbol. You know what I mean, Gerald? Gerald's nodding his head. To me, she isn't just a girl that they want to date. She's a symbol of something simple, of a girlfriend you don't have to explain stuff to, of something beautiful and perfect. And suddenly they're going to have to go into that room and explain something that's so brutally real. And I actually like that passage. I think it can be read several different ways, which is what I think is interesting about it. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's an interesting passage.
I agree she's a symbol. I just still think they're still doing the whole kind of they even kick down the door like macho men. There's this kind of swagger.
What are you going to do, knock on it? I mean, it's kind of an emergency.
It is an emergency, so why are you, worrying about your hair and if you have something in your teeth? That's my whole point. There's this swagger.
Okay. Yeah. Cue 1 hour argument over 1 paragraph in a short story.
Which we shouldn't stay on because there was something else. There was another thing.
Oh, something else bothered you. Okay, where is it?
This is the thing I actually like, though. This is a good thing.
Watch it be this thing I hated.
No, I was just, because you were talking about that line that you don't necessarily want to know the answer to a mystery. You don't want to know what they're explaining.
I love that line. Do not touch the hem of mystery.
No, I love that. Yeah, I loved it too. But there was also this other thing about kind of escapism. Because throughout the whole story, even before Sai dies, the specter of death is very prevalent. Everyone knows they're going to die because of this plant sooner rather than later, but hopefully a little later than right now. And when somebody dies but they don't see the body, there's this kind of it's like this knee-jerk reaction back into, because this town has a bit of a storytelling aspect. There's the girl that if you leave $10 on your car and ask for a cherry donut, she shows up in your room, right? There's the story about the guy whose skull became a skull, a diamond after a fire. So they're always kind of weaving stories, and they're already weaving the story about Sai escaping, and as they weave the story of Sai escaping the town, they're escaping the reality of his death, the reality that maybe it isn't in a few years, it could be right now, like it happened to him. Which is a funny distinction. They're not scared that the plant's going to kill them eventually. They're scared that the plant's going to kill them just this second. Which is
Yeah. I felt like that was really strong throughout the story. And one thing that I really loved that showed a lot of craft. I felt like this showed a lot of craft. Was in the beginning of the story when the guys are when he's talking about how the old guys always give them crap, telling them all these stories that aren't true, and how they can tell what stories are true and which ones aren't. And the old guys describe the Leadville accident where the guy's skull turned into a diamond. He says, we think that story is true because when they tell that story, they look different. They look sad. They don't say it with the same gusto. And what was interesting is he's talking about these old guys. The old guys this, the old guys that. They tell this story, they tell that story. They're grizzled. They all have cancer. They're all on the second floor where it's cleaner, whatever. And at the end of the story, he's become the old guy. He's gone through this huge traumatic thing. And I suddenly see him in a different plant with young guys and old guys. And he'd be the guy saying, yeah, when I was back there, there was this huge fire, and there was that I thought was really interesting, where he went from being the young guy to the old guy. And then there was, like you said, this huge threat of escapism. Everybody wants to escape. Well, Sai escaped, and he came back. And I think that was something that was really crucial, because then at the end, when they're talking about why he's not dead, they all picture him, in Hollywood or in Mexico or in Canada. But he had already escaped and he already came back. And there's something there that niggles at me and that I really like. And it stuck with me long after I finished the story. This is one of those stories that several hours later I was still kind of thinking about it, and that was the thing that stuck in my head, was that he already left and came back, and yet at the end the guys are trying to put him in all these places that he wouldn't want to be anyway, but they're doing it because they need to escape, and it was wonderful.
Yeah, I think that is the thing. They'd all want to escape. They all want to get away, but they realise they can't, and it's their job, and it's the small town, and the town depends on the plant, and the plant depends on them working in it and keeping it, unsafe and all this sort of stuff. But yeah, you're right. Sai did go to California, and there was a line when he sort of said something about California and California people, and he went to watch his sister's filming, and they then came back, and he didn't like California. He didn't like Hollywood, and that was it. And he came back, so he realised that this was where his life was. But they all dream about this sort of better life somewhere else, and that's why they invent all these stories about where they, where.
And what's funny is they dream about it, but they don't really want it, because, like Annie said, when everything hits the fan, their first thought is, we have to go to a different factory. And then when the new factory is built, they all go back to the new factory. They don't take that opportunity to escape. And it's like, grass is always greener on the other side, but there's no place like home. And that's kind of the sense that I got from this, and I thought it was really, really well done.
I thought that the bit where the old guys tell this story about the skull turning into a diamond, again, it's what you say, Maya. It's the craft. Because he writes, this story we think is actually true. The old guys tell it, but reluctantly, with none of the usual eye gleam, too much pause and swallow. And
I love too much pause and swallow, like that sentence.
And you know exactly what he's talking about.
And eye gleam. Normally it's gleam with the eye or gleam in the eye, right? He just with these two words, it's all you need. Just that mastery.
I love that. I love that. There are so many places like that in the story where I would read it. It's like, that's perfect. I love that sense when I'm reading something.
Yeah, and I copied some things in, when they go into Min's room. This is in the corner cage by the open window. Her pet canary lay on the newsprint. It's just, it doesn't say the canary is dead. It lays on. It's dead, but it just
Yeah,
a lovely way of
the bird outside, the cat runs out to see the bird, and then he just lays down next to the bird. Like, that was deep. Like, it's like, oh, yay, there's a dead bird. Up. It's like, wow, that's deep.
And when he finds Min in the hotel come brothel, he says to her, "What are you doing here, Min?" And she dropped to the edge of the bed. Nobody was buying Tupperware.
I know, that was
made
great.
me laugh. That was a good line.
That really was a great line.
Yeah.
And I really felt for Min. Like, talk about a double whammy of shock for the day. That was just very painful. That whole part with Min was very, very visceral and painful as I read it. One thing I really liked is at the end of this story, there was a sentence. Wow, I got something in my eye. There was a sentence that said, "Punishment in general is hard to come by unless you know the truth." And I think, like, that sentence said so much about how this experience haunted him, how it bothered him, how difficult it would be to recover from this. And also, it explains a lot of how the other guys are still maintaining these stories because they don't know the truth, and it releases them from the punishment of the pain. And that was something that really stuck with me.
I also liked when he's looking at the county fairgrounds and the whole town is there in trailers and tents. And there's that line about, here's the girls that we used to date, the women we will marry. There's just this resignation of, like, this group of people is never going to change. This is pretty much it.
Yeah.
And there was another line that I loved when they were talking about where he might have gone, where Si might have gone. I've heard that he robs banks in Canada or robs Canadians along the banks of the Turpentine. I love that little word there. Really nice. I just put a smile to my face. I thought, yeah, it's very clever, very nicely done.
So is there anything else you want to talk about the story? Or are we ready to rate? Okay, it looks like we're ready. Who wants to go first?
Anais.
Yeah, I think for me it's like a 3.5.
The horror! Be still, my heart.
I was going to give it a 3, but then I remembered in this conversation the things I did like about it, and I decided, okay, maybe another half. But
I'm just stabbed in the heart.
Yeah, but the issues with voice, the kind of lack of urgency in the face of a crisis. I mean, I understand that they're kind of all prepared and used to it, and that this could happen to them at any time. But there's this expression in Spanish, which roughly translates to, it's different to see her across the room than to dance with her. Which is, even if you know she's coming, even if you see her walking towards you, it's totally different to have her in your arms and have her up close and dance. That's kind of, I think, it's kind of like, yeah, I know that you guys were always aware this could happen, but it just happened. That's different. So yeah, 3.5.
Ooh, I want to argue. I want to argue so bad.
We can do whatever we want. It's a podcast.
Just like, you're not judging the story, you're judging the characters' reactions.
Oh, wait, I thought it was a weird choice to have him be so like, people, everything's dying. Okay.
Oh, my tears. Oh, my tears.
Well,
okay, Gerald, you're next.
Cheer up a bit, it's a 5 from me.
Woohoo!
I love. Yeah, I hadn't sort of quite got the depth that you look for in some literary short fiction, but the writing was so clever, so well done, and such an intriguing story, and such an insight into that little town with this death plant, that I really enjoyed it.
Okay, and it's funny because before this podcast I was going to give it a 5, but afterwards I'm giving it a 5.5 because I realized I love the story even more than I already thought I did.
Very good. I didn't before we started recording this. I didn't know what I was going to score it. I sometimes when you discuss it, different things come out, and you remember different things, and you think, oh, I like that bit. So,
Yeah.
so I think my rating
I
probably went
really, really
about
loved it. This was so much
30.
fun for me. This was so much fun for me.
I will say one thing though, because I just forgot when we were talking about voice. There was one moment where I felt like, is he talking about this as if it were an out-of-body experience as he was going through it? Because one of the tags in the short story was experimental, and I'm wondering what the experiment was. And if that was it, okay, I still don't love it, but all right.
See, I saw like his distance. That to me was what you would feel as you were going through it. Like it was that out of body experience. You know, I went through personal trauma recently that I'm not going to discuss on air. But as I was going through that, oh my God, this is what's going on. Like my reaction was very similar to that out of body tunnel vision reaction that he was expressing in here. But also for me, like when I judge a story, I don't really judge. When I judge a story as far as like the characters' reactions to things, I judge it based on whether or not those characters' reactions make sense for that character, not whether or not like they make sense to me. And I felt like his reactions made sense to him on multiple levels. And so that was fine for me. But that's also because the writer was able to bring me in really close and to form an empathy with the characters. If you're reading this and you don't know people like this, and the writer wasn't able to bring you in close enough to feel an empathy for that character, then his reactions are going to feel kind of weird and like something that you don't quite understand, and maybe you're not going to enjoy the story as much. So for me, when I hear you talk, I don't see that as a problem with the character's choices. I see it as a problem with the author being unable to fully bring you in to feel empathy for the character so that you understood his reactions. Does that make sense?
No, yeah, that makes sense. Because, right, even the way that the character was presented to me, I'm still like, this is your whole
You
life.
didn't get him. You didn't get it.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, why don't you care more? Yeah.
Yeah. And so, yeah, I totally get your 3.5. It makes me sad because I love this story so much. Oh, my God, I love this story so much. And it put a total nail in, I'm noticing, as I was saying on one of my recent vlogs, I was like, there's certain threads that go through all the stories that I rate 4 and above. And one of them is how finely and tightly crafted the story is. And I didn't realize it until after I read this story. I was like, yep. That's one of the things that's really going to help me rate a story high, is if it's really tightly crafted, and this was really tightly crafted. So much love. So are we going to submit for next week? Y'all are going to hate me if the story. I hope I win this story. I hope I win this week because I want Gerald to hate me.
Oh, good. That can be arranged.
Because it will be fun.
We have to do last week's Bradbury's first.
Yep. What did we get last week?
So last week, listeners gave In the Cemetery Where Al Jolson is Buried by Amy Hempel 4.5 Bradburys.
Awesome.
That's a good score. Good score.
Yeah, that is a good score.
Okay, it's time to choose next week's story. I'm hosting again. But first, what stories do you want to read next week? Let's go to Anais first.
Did I scare you, Gerald?
Yep.
I want to read Cathedral by Raymond Carver.
Ooh.
Ooh, nice, safe choice. This is great because our stories could not be more polar opposite. While this story was categorized as experimental, I didn't see the experiment either. And we haven't really had any truly experimental fiction. So, Again, it is a story written as a series of 140 character tweets.
I want you to win suddenly, but no, I also want to be Carver.
I want this story to win so bad. It was published, I think it's in the New York Times, or it might be the Atlantic. I'll have to look it up. But yes, I was like, yes. So we got tweets and Carver. Couldn't be more opposite, right?
Very good. I don't mind which wins. Before you said that, I was going to say make sure Anais wins, but no, we're I don't mind. Okay, so this week's game, because we had a story about sort of disaster and alarms going off. This week's quiz is all about words that begin with the letters R-E-D. Red.
1 second. I have to find something for my daughter.
I like this.
Red pudding.
I'm a little nervous.
1 second.
I haven't played a game in a long time. I think I hosted the last 5 or 6.
Oh, wow.
Strange to sit on this side.
Yeah. It's
Nope, that's mine. Where? Oh, Risa, I'm recording the podcast. This should have been done last night.
This should also be put at the end, like the blooper reel.
Banging in the
Really? You need your
crash.
Kaiser card now?
Yeah.
The bang, crash, drawers opening.
There's one in there.
Yeah.
Take it and go.
Don't go yet. I'm still looking in the second drawer. But there is one in there. I saw it. And freaking A.
I lock out the cats just to avoid this because
Children aren't the same as cats, although sometimes I think they do look at you and want to kill you or eat you, but it is slightly different.
slightly.
Yeah.
Just slightly different.
Okay.
Oh, I think, nope, that's not it. Hi. Here's this wallet. Okay. Do you see me just throw my planner?
Again, blooper reels. I think we should start adding them.
Total blooper reels. Okay, so what's the game?
Okay, I'll go again. This week's game, since the story was all about explosions and alarms, the answers to these questions are all words beginning with red, R-E-D. So that's
Red.
red for danger, alarms, you see.
Okay, can you give us an example? And he looks at me like deer in headlights.
Okay, I'll do something like, right, adding 3 letters to the end of red gives us something we all vainly try to do when dieting.
Reduce.
The answer is reduce, yeah.
You still can't find it. No, it's not in here. Look in the other. Raisa, I'm filming a podcast. This is so not cool. Like, people are watching this live.
We don't have this trouble on CNN, do we?
Here are the other folk. Here are all my drawers.
Children.
You need a red light out. No, it's a red light outside. No.
A red light. I love it.
No.
It'd be like ding, 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 ding.
Sorry, I have to do something else. So.
Oh, man, that is hella funny. Okay, so let's do this thing.
Okay, so we know what we're doing.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll go to Anais first, because her name's first in the alphabet. Adding 3 letters to the end of red sees us getting cash or goods for a voucher.
Redeem.
Redeem is correct.
This is not easy.
Oh,
This
sorry.
is like Jeopardy.
By adding 3 letters to the end of red, we have something our faces do when we feel embarrassed. What is this?
Redden.
Woohoo! See? It's not that bad, is it? Anais, add 3 letters to red to give a word which means strike out or remove.
Strike out or remove. Redact.
It is correct.
Look at her being all smarty pants.
Okay, with 7 letters added to the end of red, Maya, we find something again that's been forgotten or overlooked in the passing of time.
Forgotten or overlooked.
We find something again that's been forgotten or lost.
Rediscovered.
Rediscovered. Very good. This is not very good actually. It's too easy.
Okay.
Anais, adding 5 letters to the end of red shows us another direction we can take.
Another direction we can take.
Yeah.
Redirect.
Redirect.
We're getting too many of these, aren't we?
Yeah.
Is there going to be a tiebreaker?
I know. I'm going to have to find a tiebreaker. Put 5 letters to the end of red to try hard to achieve something.
Try hard to achieve something.
Or add extra effort.
Wow, I think I may be the first one to go down. My brain just, I got nothing. It's going to be really obvious, isn't it? It's going to be one of those words that after you say it, I'm going to be like, ah, man.
Maybe. Anais, do you know?
So it's try really hard.
Or add extra effort?
Add extra effort. Is it like redouble? That's not really a word.
It's redouble, yes.
It is? Okay.
Very good.
That's I had to think like a Brit because Americans don't say that. I'm like,
Yeah, I
Oh,
didn't.
really?
I've never heard that.
trick.
I think this is an American too.
See, you cheated because you've got a Brit in the house.
Well, you're both sort of Americans, so it's fair. Dear, I'm going to ask you to spell colour in a minute.
Hey, I spell it both ways. That sounded bad.
Right, so it's back to Anais. If you want to repeat what you've done again, you add one letter to the end of red.
Redo.
Redo. Right, out of date and no longer necessary. 6 letters on the end of red, Maya. Out of date.
Redundant.
Redundant. And finally, oh no, we've done that one. That was the.
By the way, we don't use that word that way, but I know that word because Joanna Penn used it. And she's a Brit.
Very good. And that's it. So we tot up the scores on the super scoreboard. And Maya, you have 3. Anais, you have 5.
Aww.
Sorry, Maya.
Redouble.
Double, yes.
I was looking so forward to reading tweets.
You have to redouble your efforts, Maya, in these quizzes.
That was awesome. That was totally
Yeah.
awesome.
I was just thinking we should ask listeners to tell us in their comments who are they cheering for? Were they cheering for the 100 just to get a sense of what people want to read? Because we're just here having fun.
I just love that we had like super hyper traditional short story with a short story told in a series of tweets.
And I want to know, do listeners
Awesome.
want to read tweets? Which I wouldn't mind it. Or do they want to read Carver? I go both ways as well. That's all depends out.
Anyway, moving on.
Nothing to see here.
Okay, so next week we are reading Cathedral by Raymond Carver. Did we miss an important lesson in this mustard plant explosion? Tell us. Join the discussion at literaryroadhouse.com. And while you're at it, leave an iTunes, Stitcher, or Spreaker review. But most important of all, don't forget to tell your friends. Until next time, read a good story.
Do, do, do,